Welcome to the Deep Dive. This is where we take the sources you're curious about, the things you send our way, and really dig into them to pull out the core knowledge. It's a focused exploration just for you. So today, we're plunging into something pretty fascinating. It's a historical document, a 1936 manual from the Police Academy of Zhejiang province in Shanghai. The title is CINNAFA, Skill of Catch and Hold. The author is Liu Jin Sheng, working with Zhejiang. We've got a translated and edited version here.
So right off the bat, 1936, Police Academy. This screams practical application.
Exactly. This wasn't some theoretical treatise, it was for police officers in Shanghai.
And published by Shan Wu, also in Shanghai, 1936. It really grounds it. This was meant for like immediate use, real world stuff for law enforcement back then.
And the structure of the manual itself is surprisingly clear. It's laid out in 8 parts.
8 parts, okay.
Yeah, covering head holds, neck holds, shoulder holds, then holds for the front, side, and back of the body.
Pretty thorough.
Right. Then torso and stomach holds, hand and wrist holds, finger holds, and it even gets into techniques for the genitals and legs.
Wow, comprehensive.
But what really jumped out at me, and probably you too, is that it doesn't just show the holds. It details the counteractions for them.
Ah, okay. That's significant.
Isn't it? It's like a two-way street for each technique. Offense and defense together.
Yeah, that's actually quite advanced thinking for the time, not just here's how you grab someone, but also here's how someone might try to stop you, and here's how you deal with that.
Exactly.
It suggests a more holistic view of a struggle, anticipating resistance, key stuff, even today in like control tactics.
So let's talk about the author, Liu Jin Sheng, born in Shandong province.
Okay.
And his martial arts journey apparently started with an old manuscript. Something passed down in his family.
Interesting. A family tradition.
Yeah, but here's where it gets really layered. He also trained, and pretty extensively it seems, with a very well-known master named Wang Ziping.
Oh, Wang Ziping, nicknamed Yan'an. Right.
That's the one. Deep roots in Wushu, Muslim family from Kangzhou, Hebei.
Yeah.
Learned from loads of different masters.
Yeah, a big name.
Yeah.
He was even dean of the Shaolin faculty down in Nanking, I think.
Right. So Liu Jin Sheng has this kind of blend. You've got the potentially ancient, maybe even secret family stuff, mixed with formal training under a major contemporary figure. And he'd been training for over 20 years by this point. He clearly valued that family manuscript, though.
That's a fascinating combination, isn't it? The old lineage, maybe less common techniques, combined with exposure to, the current state of martial arts through someone like Wang Ziping.
Definitely.
That duality probably shaped the whole manual, the philosophy, the techniques chosen.
Now, the name itself, Chin Na Fa, it's pretty direct, right? Chin is catch, Na is hold, and Fa is skill or method.
The skill of catch and hold. Makes sense.
But the book also mentions some alternative names that kind of give more flavor, like FEN, GNFA.
Which means?
Separation of muscles or sinews.
Ooh, okay. More descriptive of the effect.
Exactly. And DI Teng FA for ground combat.
Ground combat too, so not just standing grabs.
Seems like it. And also YUGUFA, which refers to dislocating bones or joints.
Right. So catch and a hold is the general idea, but these other names point to the sharper end of it, disrupting structure, joint locks, taking it to the ground.
Yeah, it seems Chin Na Fa just became the umbrella term, the most common one used.
Makes sense. It's broader.
The manual even touches on this traditional concept of 72 methods.
Ah, the classic numbers.
Right. It connects it to something called DISHASHU, or Devil's Hand, which was apparently in that old family manuscript.
The devil's hand, okay.
And this links back to Chinese mythology, the 36 Tian gang and 72 DISHA stars or spirits.
Right, the celestial rulers and the earthly fiends. Common symbolism.
But interestingly, Liu Jin Sheng himself kind of waves it away, suggesting that while it's part of the history, this 72 number doesn't really impact the actual techniques being taught.
Yeah, that sounds familiar. A nod to tradition, the symbolic framework, but keeping the focus on what works. Practicality over mythology for the actual training.
And we get more context from the prefaces. This is one by Zhejiang.
Good collaborator, yeah. Who was he?
He was actually responsible for police training in Zhejiang province.
Ah, okay, so the guy in charge.
Exactly. And in his preface, dated March 25th, 1936, very specific, he really stresses Chen Na's value in subduing people without causing serious injury.
That fits perfectly, doesn't it, for police training? The goal is control, arrest. Minimizing harm is usually crucial in that context. Subdue, not necessarily destroy.
Precisely. Then you have Liu Jin Sheng's own preface, which is, well, it's quite revealing.
Oh, yeah. What does he say?
He talks about what he sees as a decline in Chinese national martial arts, wushu.
A decline. Why?
He points partly to things like the Boxer Rebellion, the Aihutuan,
Right. 1900. That had huge repercussions.
and the period of foreign influence and oppression that followed. He even compares China unfavorably to Japan after the Meiji Restoration.
Ooh, interesting. Implying martial spirit is tied to national strength.
Very much so. He calls for advocating national martial arts to bolster the spirit of the people. And he criticizes martial arts training that's just about forms, lacking practical application, lacking fighting spirit.
So he's seeing a problem. People are doing the movements, but maybe losing the intent, the effectiveness.
That seems to be his view. He notes that while the central government did support martial arts, famous schools like Shaolin and Wudang didn't have a massive reach. He wanted something more effective and maybe more widespread.
That reflects a real concern for keeping these traditions relevant, doesn't it? Making sure they actually work in a changing world. The Boxer Rebellion definitely led to some reevaluation of traditional ways and criticizing form over function. That's a direct shot at making martial arts practical again, like for national defense, for the police.
Yeah. And he also observes that, unlike other sciences that were advancing, he felt Chinese martial arts hadn't really progressed. He worried that valuable methods, maybe secret ones, had been lost.
The classic lament of lost knowledge. You hear that in many traditions. Fragmentation, things not being passed down properly.
And then he brings it back to his own story, learning from his grandfather's manuscript first, and then studying under Wang Ziping. It really frames why he wrote the book.
To preserve and share the practical stuff he'd learned. Bridging that old family knowledge with the more modern, structured training he got. Makes sense.
Liu is super clear about the purpose. These techniques, they're for practical use. Self-defense, police work, even military application. For defending the motherland, as he puts it.
Right. Real-world application is the priority.
And he hammers home the need for sparring, practice against a resisting opponent.
Absolutely crucial. You can't just drill in the air. Timing, distance, feeling the resistance. You only get that through sparring.
But he also warns, be careful in training. Don't use excessive force. Don't injure your partners.
The classic training dilemma. Need realism, but also safety.
Right. He contrasts it with life or death situations where presumably the gloves are off. He also talks about daily training, needing flexibility, nimbleness,
Agility, yeah.
and this idea of hardness being hidden inside softness.
The yielding principle.
Right.
Using structure and relaxation, not just brute force. That's a core concept in a lot of internal and practical martial arts. Develop the power through softness.
He then gives this broader view of combat, breaking it down into 4 kinds.
4 kinds, okay.
Yeah. DINXUE, which is impacting acupuncture points.
Pressure points, vital points.
DA, which is striking, blows.
Hitting, yeah.
NA, which is grappling, the focus of this book.
Catch and hold, the Chin Na itself.
And SHUAI, which is throwing techniques.
Okay, the 4 main pillars?
Yeah.
Points, striking, grappling, throwing.
And he says real mastery comes from skillfully combining all 4.
A complete fighter, basically.
But he clarifies this book is only about NA, the grappling. He hints maybe future books would cover the others.
Focusing allows depth, though. Better to cover one area well.
And to help with that, the book apparently had 99 photographs illustrating the techniques.
99 photos. In 1936, that's a big deal. Visual aids would have been incredibly valuable. Much clearer than just descriptions or drawings. Shows a real commitment to teaching effectively.
Definitely. And finally, just looking at the intro sections, he specifically talks about the head grips, TOUBUNAFA.
Head grips, okay.
And he gives this really neat historical tidbit. During the Ming and Qing dynasties, men often wore their hair in knots or queues, right?
Yeah, the Q hairstyle for the king, definitely.
So some of the initial techniques involving grabbing the hair were, like, super relevant back then. Easy target.
Makes sense. Yeah, a convenient handle.
But Liu acknowledges that hairstyles changed by 1936. People weren't all wearing queues anymore.
Right, styles evolved.
Yet, he argues the techniques, or at least the principles, are still valid. Because even if you're not grabbing a specific knot of hair, the wrist control involved in those techniques is still key. The hand is still connecting, controlling the head via the wrist or hand.
That's smart. Adaptable thinking. Recognizing the context changes, but the underlying biomechanics controlling the wrist to influence the head remains sound. It's about the principle, not just the specific target.
So wrapping up this initial look,
Yeah.
just getting into the manual, you can already see the the breadth of it, can't you? Even just in these early parts about head and neck grips.
Absolutely. Hair seizing, face manipulation, pressure points on the head and neck, defenses against chokes. It's detailed stuff.
It really gives you a window, doesn't it, into a very specific approach to self-defense, law enforcement control from a particular time and place.
For sure. And it's not just a list of moves, is it? It's embedded in this historical context, concerns about national strength, the role of martial arts, the practical needs of police in, well, a pretty turbulent era in China.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you, the listener, to kind of mull over. How does this historical perspective on control developed 80, 90 years ago for specific police and self-defense needs in Shanghai? How might that inform the way you think about conflict, control, or even physical assertion today?
Yeah, not necessarily drawing direct lines like, do this now because they did it then, because the context is obviously different.
Right, the text doesn't talk about modern policing or anything like that.
Yeah, but considering those underlying ideas about leverage, control versus harm, practicality, and how they thought about it back then, it can offer a different lens perhaps, a historical depth to understanding these perennial issues of managing confrontation.